Allie with Potomac Beads, and in this Better Beader episode, we are going to unlock whether netting stitch is actually just an extension of peyote. I think so, and here's why. So the reason that I decided to do this Better Beader episode was really to help people with that netting design. As I was live on one of my Twitch recordings, I was showing that when you pick up beads, if you're doing something in a round, like this tubular peyote stitch end here, that it easily and quickly becomes netting. Now, netting can be done in a number of different ways, but I wanted to show, just with a simple example here, that people shouldn't be afraid of the idea of netting. Whether or not it's something as simple as like a Christmas ball cover, or even like this sparkler earrings, the bigger you get in a circular, a tubular, or a regular flat peyote stitch, it can easily become and look like netting. So I have here some 8/0 beads in the lava red, and just some 15/0s in the crystal. What I'm going to show is, here is my 3 beads, or my 3 rows of my peyote stitch that I have 6 beads on first. I'm going to do my first row of my peyote stitch, adding on my beads here. And I've got lots of tutorials if you need to know how to do peyote stitch. Lots and lots of tutorials, whole episodes of lives based on this. Now, as I go back into my stitch here, peyote is based on the idea of basically skipping a bead from the selection below and adding one more. So here I have 3 beads that are now facing up. I'm going to do one more row of my peyote stitch, adding 3 beads, sewing through the bead that's sticking up that's already there, and skipping the bead that's down a little bit. From here, I'm going to add my last bead in what is my 4th row of my peyote stitch here. As I add my next row of the peyote stitch, I'm going to add some beads in. So I'm going to go in here, add 2 15s, one of my 8/0s, and 2 15s. Sew through that upper 8/0, and that continues the peyote stitch. From here, same thing, 2 15s, 1 8, 2 15s. This sets you up perfectly to continue the netting. Again here, going in, adding 2 of my 15s, 1 of my 8s, and 2 15s. When I sew into the last bead now, you can look back and you see that I have basically a netting stitch. Now off to the side here, I'm going to continue with that stitch idea of increasing it, because netting is just basically an increase in peyote. I have the 2 beads here. I'm coming off the side. I need to gather a new one. 2 15s, 1 8, 2 15s, and I'm sewing into my 1 bead there that's there for the peyote stitch. Again, 2 beads on, 1 8, 2 beads on. Now I can be using any beads to do this, obviously, and then sewing through just the 8. So unlike the rest of the peyote stitch, I'm not sewing through every single bead. With the netting, I'm just sewing through the 1 bead that's sitting in the center. So yes, it is the exact same as peyote, adding in 2 15s, 1 8, 2 15s, and connecting just on to the 8 from the row below. When I go back now and I continue to add, you can see how it's starting to repeat the pattern, but instead of going through and adding sewing through every single bead, I'm just sewing through 1 bead in that peyote stitch. Going through and adding extra beads now. You can see how when I pick up that open 8 below, I'm sewing through to get that netting, and look, you have that netted look. So you're still doing the peyote stitch, adding the beads here, and getting back into that every other bead. When you're doing something in a tubular stitch like this, same idea. This is a tubular peyote stitch, and I have 3 beads sitting here at the top. So here in the example, as I'm holding this tubular peyote, I'm coming out of 3 of my 3 millimeters there. I'm going to add 2 15s, 1 8, 2 15s, just because they're here, and sew over to the next peyote bead that's up. Same thing here, adding 2, 1, 2, sewing through the next bead that's already there. Same thing here, 2, 1, 2, and I'm sewing through that first bead that my thread was coming out of. To step up on a tubular piece, you're going to sew back through the first bead that you just added in this row. Instead, I'm going to sew back through those 2 15 and my 1 8. Now when I sew through, I'm going to ignore those 15s, and I'm sewing through just the 8s, almost like I'm continuing with peyote stitch. 2 15s, 1 8, 2 15s. Sew through just the 8, ignoring the 2 side beads on that peyote bead. So is peyote stitch the same as a netted stitch? No. But is netted stitch a form of peyote? I would argue yes, because really it's based on the same idea of creating rows, skipping a bead, and sewing through and adding more beads. Here when I get back to the round, I'm going to step up again, going through the first 2 11 O's and coming out the 8. Now you can see, same thing in that peyote stitch, I have 3 beads that are sitting towards the top. Going in and just connecting onto those beads that are sitting at the top, as I increase and go around the design, it's going to still be the exact same technique as peyote, adding beads, skipping one of the red beads that's there below, but with the extra seed beads, I get the netted effect. So most netting, whether or not, again, you're looking at a Christmas ball cover, whether or not you're looking at something in the round like these sparkler earrings, most of the netting that you're created is going to be based on peyote stitch. In this original design here, I have my 5 beads with 1 delicate in between each. In Cheryl's design then, we skip over our seed beads and add a line of, or we skip over our crystals, excuse me, and add a line of seed beads here. Sew through the bead that we skipped over, and then add more beads on top. So it's that same idea of sewing through beads and then skipping through a bead. When you do the netting, just your extra beads in that little row, you're not always sewing through every bead. You're just going to be sewing through a portion of the bead. So in conclusion, 1, definitely watch how to do the regular peyote stitch, and then the crystal lace bracelet would be my ideal video for you to kind of learn lace or to learn that netting. That it is all based on the same idea. So there's a lot of debate when it comes to different patterns, different ideas, whether or not who's done it first, who's done it second. Most of the main patterns or the main designs are based off of one another. Even honestly, herringbone stitch is kind of just using 2 beads and not skipping over a bead, sewing right into the next one. So there's all of these different stitches that have come and that are based on other stitches, and then just one little simple thing like the inclusion of 15 O's will change it from a simple peyote stitch to a netted look. Whether or not they're the same, but whether or not the netting is definitely part of peyote stitch, I would argue yes. You can leave your arguments, which I'm sure there'll be many, down below and let us know what you think. So is netting just a form of peyote? Let us know your opinion down in the comments. As well as, if you haven't already, check out that corner there to subscribe to get regular updates from us here at PotomacBeads. You can also give a little thumbs up for the different Better Beader episodes, ask more questions below, and if you do need any supplies, check the links below to shop with us online. This is going to form a fun debate, I'm sure. Thanks so much for watching, and enjoy your peyote stitch, or your netting, or your lace, or all the different stitches in between that are generally just based off the same thing with one little alteration.